Welcome to the podcast, Beyond Expectations, Parenting Autism. Follow Michelle Chabola's journey of raising a child with autism, the challenges, victories, and rewards. If you're a parent, caregiver, or simply someone seeking to understand autism on a personal level, you're in the right place.
All right. Welcome to Beyond Expectations today. Welcome everybody back. Thanks for still watching and listening. And we have a guest today from Colorado, and her name is Allysen Ortega, and she has been a friend of Gregory's. We were just trying to calculate since 5th grade. And now she's going to tell you where she's at and how she's been affected by Gregory's life and everything he offered her. Welcome, Allysen.
Yes, welcome, Allysen.
All right, well, thank you. Yeah, thank you. Hi. So yeah, me and Greg have quite the history. So it started when I moved from California to Colorado, and it was 5th grade. We moved at the end of 4th grade for my dad's job. Summer, our neighbors didn't have a whole lot of kids, so starting 5th grade, I was super nervous. And first day of school, we're the first ones there by chance, Greg before me, and then I closely second. He just came up and started talking to me. It was so crazy. He just put me at ease. And so it was a very comfortable transition. We'll get to this, but I am now a special education teacher. So looking back now, reflecting as, a 10-year-old, I didn't quite know other kids with disabilities, right? And so I could tell that Greg was different, but it definitely didn't put me off by any means. He was always hanging out with me, my friends at recess. We played this game called, Harry Potter, which we were like reenacting and just running all over the fields. And I don't think Greg really had any idea what he was, the context, but he was running around right with us. And so that's kind of where our relationship started. And then, as getting older, probably more into 6th grade, I started really noticing some of the other kids with differences. Again, truly not understanding disabilities, IEPs, or anything, but I knew that I wanted to be more engaged with that population. So come middle school, we're both there together, and very, very different. You're not in the same class all day. You're going to all these different places. And I think the first time I truly saw, I'm a teacher now, so I'm using big words, but some dysregulation from Greg is, it was passing period. I can't remember if it was 7th or 8th grade, but he was getting ready to go to English. I was getting ready to go to history. Our lockers were like right across from each other. Passing period's like 5 or so minutes. Like the bell rings, everyone starts rushing to class, right? And he is just losing it. He's like throwing stuff out of his locker. At one point, he kind of had his backpack on his head, like spinning around. And I'm like, I cannot just leave him and go to class. Everyone else is, looking, walking by. And I was like, hold on, I know Greg. So I sit down with him, and I remember it had been a couple of minutes, and I think a teacher had heard kind of the commotion, and it was actually my teacher who came out, and he looked at me, and at first I was like, oh my gosh, I'm in trouble. I'm not in class. And I almost got up to stand up, and he just like shook, his finger and was like, no, it's fine. Ultimately, what had happened was Greg could not find his English book, and he was really, really worried he was going to get in trouble for it. So he could not leave his spot until he found it, and I'm almost certain it was at home. We checked everywhere. And I want to say it was probably about 10 or so minutes to get him regulated, to calm down. And then I walked him to class. We went and talked to his teacher, and she said, no problem, I have extras. So all good. And so that was like a really interesting and like fulfilling moment for me, because I think that is truly when I got to see a bit more of those impacts versus where like, hey, elementary, early on, something's about a little bit different about this kid. Right. And then getting to that point of like, okay, so there's some bigger things going on here. And so it's truly at that point, again, I just really wanted to get involved with those students. And so they didn't quite have like peer mentorship programs at that point. I think we might have had a unified team in middle school. I can't remember.
Did you do Circle of Friends? If that's what it was called?
Yeah. Okay. So that's what it was. So yeah, Circle of Friends. And then once we got to high school, fully involved in Unified. It was amazing. And, freshman and sophomore year, pivotal for any student, right? Bigger school, changing classes much more frequently, higher level content. And actually, me and Michelle were just chatting about this too. And I think one of the great things is that, although I knew that Greg had differences, he was still in all the classes. Like he was very involved in the general education class, which I think is awesome. And for high school, I would say freshman, sophomore year, I did all the unified stuff. Sorry, my dog's in the background. But that was what was available. And so thankfully the school didn't care. Like you could retake unified as many times as you want. It was really great relationship building. I love that the high school we went to, Chatfield, had a really big like part in building that supportive community.
So I don't understand, what is unified? What does that mean?
Oh, so it's a nationwide like, what would you call it?
Well, that was Coach
Program.
Dookie that was on, Sean, the unified basketball.
Yeah.
That's the unified program.
And so a lot of it
is a national platform. Is it like a curriculum? Tell me more about it.
So not quite a curriculum. The biggest one is like the unified PE, like in schools, right? And so that's a PE class where you're playing fun games and you've got peers and you've got individuals who are on IEPs, and it's just to build that relationship, build the partnership. That way, when you are in the hallways, you know, you're like, oh, hey, so-and-so, hey, so-and-so. And it's really cool for like the culture and climate of a school. I think very accepting of individuals with disabilities. And a lot of schools, I think, still do provide those classes. I do think it's a
class for kids to go, and they get a chance to go help out the kids with special needs.
Yes, and it's primarily for PE. I think that they do have other opportunities. I think Unified kind of leads into Special Olympics, to where there is more leadership and other partnership. It's kind of, I think, to get kiddos. And I never worked for Unified. This is just what I remember. But I think it's a good way to get the community involved and support, you know, our neurodivergent peers and friends. So started with that. And then starting my junior year, because now I had a little bit more knowledge. I had developed a really close relationship with some of the special ed teachers there, specifically in the significant support needs classroom. So I don't know if you remember, Michelle, but it was a Stacy Keene and Sharon McManus who I developed really close relationships to. They were like my mentors. So I also taught, or not taught, but got to volunteer as like getting an elective credit in the school coffee business. So I did that and worked with a lot of those individuals. And then I had to do a little bit of poking and prodding with my school counselor. But once I got to my junior year and I knew that this was the avenue I was taking, I really fought and said, listen, I've met my PE credit. I've met my art credit. I don't care about any other elective. Like, I just want to be a TA in the SSN classroom. So significant support needs. And they did it. And so it was great. So I primarily, again, worked with Sharon and Stacy, and it was really cool because I spent a lot of time in that significant support needs classroom. And what I was sharing with Michelle is that although that was a space that Gregory spent time in, and while those teachers were involved in his education, he was not one of those kids that was just in that room, you know, all the time. But with some of the other kiddos, I got to do some like individual work and kind of practice some teaching. So some fun opportunities. But me and Greg, though, still had a weekly standing date for Wednesday mornings. And he usually got there early, and so I would, and we would hang out in the significant support needs classroom, but we just like made puzzles for, you know, 30, 45 minutes till class went. And we had such a great time through that bonding experience. And so leading into our senior year when, and we still had that same routine, unfortunately, you know, his father had passed. And so when that happened, you know, being the special needs advocate that I am, I made a Facebook group, and not to toot my own horn, but I made a Facebook group and kind of reached out to everyone in my grade. And I said, listen, we all know the last 4 years, every single person has won the same, like, or the same people have won homecoming queen, prom king and queen, like, you know, whatever. And I was like, so do we still want to do that? Or should we like show Greg's family that we support him and want to give him, you know, a really good send off for his senior year, knowing that you guys were moving to Texas? And oh my gosh, it was like a plethora of support. Everyone was like, yes, absolutely. And so then with that, everyone was like, Greg's not going to want to do this with anyone but but Allie. And so I got voted prom queen. So it was a super fun experience to kind of give Greg something positive to look forward to for that senior year versus, focusing on, the things, because already moving to Texas was a big transition for him. And, Michelle was kind enough. It was great. We had a small group. There were 6 of us. We had a limo. We went and had dinner, like a really, really great time. But then we got to after prom, which a lot of high schools practice this now to try to encourage safety for students. But after prom, they hold an event at the school that goes until 3, 4 in the morning or so. We get to after prom and there's like a theme. There's all these different events set up. I'm like, so Greg, what do you want to do first? And you guys can probably hear him say this now, but he's like, well, isn't this the time of the night that you go hang out with your friends and I go hang out with mine? And I was like, okay, so you're done with me right now. Fair enough. Good boundary setting. So I was like, okay, you do what you want to do. But I continued to want to like check on him throughout the night. And I remember that to this day, though, like all he wanted to do was be in the casino. And I don't remember if he was playing Texas poker or Texas Hold'em or blackjack or whatever, but that was where he sat the whole night, was playing at the cards. But I did think it was funny because he was like, I'm tapped out. I'm done with you. Leave me alone.
Oh, that's so funny.
In great Gregory fashion.
What an amazing story. What a big impact you have. What a big impact you've had on each other. That is fantastic. Do you see that kind of those relationships bonding now in the school where you teach?
I would say for certain students, yes, actually. I mean, I think what's hard is that, so the way my school district runs right now is they kind of separate out the programs. And I don't know if this is true when I was in high school, because my memory really only serves that like there was a significant support needs classroom. And then sure enough, there were obviously kids who were getting pulled out or doing services who had like learning disabilities. But I only ever saw special ed as like this one thing. And so the way it is now is that we have different types of programs. So there is the significant support needs. So really like the cognitive disabilities, a lot of those independent living skills impacted. And then they have an autism center program. And so kind of your classic visual schedule person with autism who benefits from that predictable structure and things like that. And then I work with affective needs. And those students that I work with, I would say have that like invisible disability where we do have some kiddos with autism towards the more like independent end of the spectrum as far as, a little bit of social emotional executive functioning, and then also academic skills. Like not all of my kids have learning disabilities. And then I've got a lot of kids with like ADHD or, kind of other health impairments that impact them. And then just general like social, emotional and trauma. So a lot of my kids, you'll talk with them, and even though they might be impacted, it takes you a while to figure it out. And so for some of them, I think who maybe seem a little bit more impacted by their disability, they're more accepted because then people are like, oh, I need to, I recognize that there's something going wrong and I need to meet you where you're at and that kind of thing. And then I think some of those other kiddos, people are like, oh no, you're being a jerk and you're acting out and you're not listening and not understanding that those kiddos are also impacted by the disability.
I see. Yeah. I see. Do you think, Allysen, that this type of because like the benefit for both of you, obviously we're super appreciative of everything you did for GMIT. Is that, can the administration or the parents create that, or is it just the magic of happenstance?
In my experience, I think it does start with the culture and climate of the school. And so, starting from the top down. I know that the program that I'm working in right now, it's fairly new to the school. It's only been there for about 4. I can't remember if last year was the 4th year or if this is the 4th year. And I know initially with the population of kids that I work with affective needs, people see that and they think behavior, violence, outbursts. And while those things do happen, and looking at their paperwork, even like IEPs, behavior plans, unfortunately, we kind of paint those students on their worst day in those documents because we want to support them. Obviously, you put the positive things in there, but people see like, oh, physical aggression or property destruction, and you immediately think like, oh, this is prevalent. And it's usually few and far between. So I think as long as, you've got the administration, supporting it, and then I think even going down to the special education department and making sure that they are working with general education teachers, making them feel supported, whether it's with behaviors, accommodations, just other student needs, then we can continue that down for the other students to see. I think if there is a space for that fear, and whether it's like, and I'm speaking for affective needs, but even with significant support needs, you see that a kid is tube fed, right? That scares some people. So I think just being very, and still respecting privacy and things like that, but being very upfront, honest, and partnering with the general education team, and they see us all working together, and it's not like, oh, hey, that's just a SPED kid. It's everybody's kid. And so I think it starts that way, and kids follow suit. I mean, we've got a great community of, I always want to call them young adults because they look that way, but they're still teenagers who do make partnerships. I mean, even this last year was my second year at this school, and we had so many kids coming to our classroom just to say hi, whether it was to students, to me. They wanted to pop in and just take like a 5-minute break, and even welcoming them into our classroom and showing like, yeah, this is a place for everyone, I think helps with some of the stigma with what our students face.
Instead of keeping it separate, its own wing, its own class, nobody else can go into.
Is the opportunity to volunteer, or as you said, substitute PE credits for the chance to be a TA with the kids that need special needs, is that marketed to kids to let them know it's available?
So I don't think it's marketed. And I mean, math is hard, but like 15 years ago is when I was really pushing for this. Because I knew that it was the pathway I was going to take. I don't think it's something that they necessarily market. And I think it would depend on the level of need, because one thing you want to definitely make sure is that you're not opening yourself up to liability with confidentiality with students and the things that happen in the classroom.
Right.
And then with the kids that I work with too, and I'm sure other programs feel this as well, but also just safety. I mean, like I said, the verbal aggression, verbal outbursts, physical aggression, all of that, like it happens. It doesn't happen every day, but it happens. And so needing to have like those plans and procedures in place, because I have had to, like this last year was funny. I had a student who needed some space, so I moved everyone to the next class. I sat with that student and they just screamed my head off for a good 10 minutes, and it's totally fine though. They're having their moment. And I guess the students next door were talking to my co-teacher and were like, is she yelling at Miss Allysen? Is she hurting Miss Allysen? Because we're going to have some words with her. And it's so funny because I remind my students all the time, since they do sometimes see the poor treatment of the teachers, that I'm an adult. I can handle it. I really don't care what a 14 to 18-year-old thinks about me. I love what I do, because guess what? This is one moment and immediately they're going to regulate and be sad and feel horrible already. And say, that is not what I meant. Like, that's the things. Our students are learning how to do those things, process those feelings in appropriate ways. And it doesn't always happen.
Yeah. Right. But that's the skill. That's the talent of being able to help them. So part of the reason Michelle put this podcast together is to try to, she went through this. None of us knew anything about autism when Gregory was diagnosed. And then Michelle dove in and kind of figured out, I think even in Gregory's lifetime, there was more and more information, services, whatever, but there still seems to be lots of morsels of information that can make a big difference in someone's life if they don't know about how to prepare for an IEP or what have you. So anything come to mind in terms of like words of wisdom for parents as their kids are headed into school or prepping for school or reaching out for these resources? Like, what have you seen that works? What have you seen that's maybe not so good?
Well, a couple of things do come to mind. And one thing I want to say too is, just because someone is diagnosed with autism does not mean that they automatically get an IEP. Or really even certain other disabilities, right? You have to look at that educational impact. And so I think one of the biggest things I would share, and I would share this for educators along with parents, is just really monitoring that and communicating with teachers, because I have seen, especially with the younger kids, or even now, I guess, secondary, oh, they tried, I'm going to give them the A, right? But you're not actually documenting their skill level. And that's where the special education teachers should be coming in, taking that data, doing the assessments to really like catch the students. And I don't think it's, unreasonable to request those types of evaluations. It's a pain in the butt for a special education teacher, I'll tell you that right now. But we, from the educator's standpoint, we had a kiddo who came in as a freshman this last year. He had just had an evaluation done in 8th grade. And we looked at it and I was like, this isn't comprehensive. They didn't do all the things they needed to do. And we were figuring out all these things that went along, like anecdotally, but we didn't have the data. And so we, thankfully we had a great partnership with the parents there. And we talked about it and we're like, let's do a full eval. We did the cognitive testing. We did the speech. We did all the academic stuff, and even though it didn't change his placement, it didn't necessarily change his service minutes. We actually had paperwork that reflected the kid. And so I think with those IEP meetings and things like that, as a parent and as an educator, like, you want to make sure that it is fully encompassing and accurate. And so again, sometimes we paint our kids on the worst day because we want them to get those services, but also let's put in all those strengths and make sure that the teacher knows, like, hey, he likes X, Y, and Z, so I can use this to motivate them to do X, Y, and Z. So I think that
I was going to ask for a little bit more context on what that evaluation includes. Like, what types of things are getting measured? And by the way, like, what's the process for the evaluation? Is it 3 hours, 2 hours? Like, what's the whole thing like?
It takes a very long time. So pretty
that
much
must be hard with the special needs kid who's.
It is. So
it is very hard.
Yeah, the way the process works is that, and this could be brought upon by teachers or parents, but if you feel like there needs to be a referral, that's where you start. You say, I see a level of need. So then they look at just like the data they have. They try to maybe unofficially provide other interventions, maybe an extra math group, maybe an extra reading group, or maybe this counselor meets with them if it's more social emotional, and they see what they see there. And then if they determine that, hey, there is still this level of need, you get parent consent and you do an evaluation. And for the first evaluation, you have 60 days. And that is too, because you want to accurately test a kiddo. And an assessment that you think might take 15 minutes could take 30 minutes, an hour, 2 days. You might have to only do 5 minutes at a time because you want the data to be accurate. If they start showing signs of distress, you're not going to get accurate scores. And so it can be a long process. And so with the evaluation, it is all standardized testing. Whereas once a kid gets on an IEP, they use like state testing. They use data based on teacher observation and what they've collected, teacher input and that kind of stuff. And it's kind of just updating once they get that IEP. Then every 3 years, we have to automatically do another evaluation. However, that doesn't always mean that you do all the same testing.
When you say 60 days, so over 60 days, you have like a whole laundry list of questions to fill out. And is it literally like written things you're testing, or is it like
so it depends on what it is. So typically the different areas are like cognitive testing, and so that's done by a school psychologist, and that is a like a one-on-one assessment where a student's sitting with the school psychologist answering questions. I don't think a whole lot is like necessarily handwritten anymore. A lot of it is virtual and things like that, which can be very engaging. And so there's various assessments at different school district, different states that use for cognitive testing. I know cognitive testing with that, we also, and that's like, your IQ, right? Which we now know that is not always so representative. So then they usually do something called adaptive scores. So that's the independent living. And that's usually more so just a questionnaire. You have it filled out by a couple of different people of what they see on those skills. So usually a parent, a teacher, and then depending on the age, like a self one. So being in high school, we do a lot of self.
Should the parent be concerned about, is there risk in this? Like if I get the test What can something go wrong for me as a parent or my child if the scores
No,
are
it's
too low or?
no, all it is data. And again, cognitive testing, we've kind of gotten away from unless it's like there is some pretty significant needs. But it is just information. And so that's what's interesting too, to see the different, which like other mental health providers, so school social workers and things like that, they do more social emotional testing, which is different rating scales, which is interesting because you could have 3 totally different scores. And that doesn't mean, like, those scores don't necessarily mean anything except for like, hey, parents are rating here, we're seeing this at school, and self is seeing this. That discrepancy a lot of times makes sense, where of course they're this way at home, or of course they're this way at school, or of course they're seeing this in themselves. And what it comes down to, though, because that there's like speech, motor, and then academic. So the academic testing is what I do, and that's a pain in the butt, because it just, most of the students don't want to do it. It's things that are hard, and so it's hard to stay engaged. So really breaking it up over days, having those incentives. But what those scores really mean is it goes into then the eligibility of like, do they qualify for services? And so looking at the scores, the team, agrees or disagrees. And typically the scores are pretty cut and dry. As far as academics go, like if they're below the 12th percentile, then they have a learning disability, right? I can't speak necessarily to the other scores, but you could determine eligible or not eligible. And if you determine that, like, if the family is truly against it, then they have the choice to revoke those services. Where it gets complicated, though, is that each state kind of has some
Back up. I missed that part. So if the test goes too well, then you could lose a parent, or a parent could see their child lose services that they might actually want.
Yes, and not. And
that's such a weird thing that things might be going too well.
Or the parent doesn't want the child to get them. That happens a lot.
The parent doesn't want it. Yeah, the parents don't want.
They don't want them to be pulled out. They don't want them
to get highlighted as different.
Yeah, right. And so I think that's when it comes down to like, again, what those scores look like, because also from the educator standpoint, we don't want to take services away that are supporting them. However, once you are starting to get to that point where the scores are getting better, at that point, professionals should have already been pulling back, because the whole point is to build that independence, right? So if they are scoring this way and doing these things with so much of that support, that data is considered of, this is why they've made that progress.
It's going well, right? They're exactly where it's working.
Right. But if you take away the support, and then you did all the testing or looked at the data again, and they didn't have that support, you'd probably be back where you were. And so that is considered. I would say at the high school standpoint, we do see some kids being taken off IEPs and maybe move to a 504, or just still like getting those multi-tiered levels of supports. And that's a good thing, though, because it's been a progression, right? It's not like we're like, hey, this one evaluation is saying that you don't need us anymore. It's been like a really big body of evidence of like, hey, like I'm trying to think. So like one of our students.
What's a 504? Is a 504 a specific thing in certain states, or is that like a federal thing?
No, it's federal. And so it is one step before an IEP. And so with an IEP, that is all direct services, goals, accommodations, the whole shebang. A 504 does not have direct services, but it's accommodation. So we see a kid struggle with executive functioning or social emotional supports, or yes, there might be some learning there, but their scores did not qualify for the disability. They still could qualify for the 504, get accommodations in their classroom setting that help them be successful. So it wouldn't be a pair. It would be, hey, we're going to make sure your teacher is giving you a copy of notes. We're going to make sure that your teacher is breaking and chunking down those assignments. We're going to make sure those teachers are shortening your assignments and that kind of thing. And so 504 plans are just accommodations, where the IEP is all the services.
Like maybe longer, Sean, to take a test, or if you want to take a test where it's quiet, those are the type of accommodations a 504 would have.
Even like having check-ins with an adult, like we have some kiddos on 504s who it's, they check in with their counselor weekly just to make sure things are going good.
And qualifying for those is very objective. You're scored on a bunch of different metrics, and then you determine if you get these services.
Yeah. And I can't, again, speak totally to the process for a 504 because working with higher impact students, I pretty much always have students that qualify. Really, the things that we see right now is that, hey, we get to decrease your minutes. You don't need me so much. And I think that's another key piece of it is that least restrictive environment.
Right.
Because the way I'm familiar with it, like with the paperwork I do now, is we've got 3 ranges. We got the 0 to 40% in the gen ed class, which means you're primarily in the special ed room. We've got the 40 or 41 to 79, which means that you're like kind of half and half, and then at least 80. And I think looking at those numbers scare people sometimes because the way I see it is that even if a kiddo is 80% in the gen ed class and they have a hard couple weeks and they're in my classroom 50% of the time, that's okay. We can still provide those services. That's just not like the norm. And so I think, people
But you must be dealing with so
that.
many emotions where people feel like they're falling out of one group and into the other group. And high school is so judgmental. I mean,
yeah, I would say that I've got a handful of students who they really like thrive and like their community is our center classroom, and that's totally fine. And then I do have some students who they like to access our supports, but they want to be like, they have so many friends outside everywhere else, so they don't need to be in the classroom. It's like one kid, he just comes in, good morning, miss, and then leaves. And before the end of the day, all right, leaving, goodbye, miss. And so it really is case by case. But like I was sharing earlier, it's pretty cool that with this program growing, because when I first started there, we only had technically 1 classroom and there was 12 kids. Well, now we have 2 and we've got 24. And so it's been cool to see some of those other general education students come to the classroom and kind of treat that as their space too. So, definitely looking forward to years coming and
so helpful.
Continuing that culture.
That's so helpful. So I have one request. I know we're right at the end of our time, but if we can, I'd like to hold you over for a second and get you to answer one question I thought of.
Yeah.
So the podcast is targeted to parents because we think about when Michelle first got diagnosed with Gregory and kind of the panic and then all of the hard lessons she had to learn because we didn't have a podcast to listen to. But what if someone listening to the podcast has a high schooler and can get them to listen to at least this last part? So we'll put it in. You got to be in the lightning speed round here because we're talking about,
for sure.
This is TikTok speed here. How could you help that parent explain to their high schooler the benefits of doing what you did, volunteering, supporting, and helping these kids, and then finding a career? So recruit people into your profession.
Yeah. So actually, I think that it is just like fulfilling. Again, I knew from a very young age that this was a pathway I wanted to take. And I know not a lot of people have that to where they have all these different avenues, but those strong relationships, like if you can just find one student that you really connect with and you want to pursue that, that's how I got started in this. It all started with Greg. And just pushing that. They're so fun. They don't care. They're like all students, and this might be too generalizing, but they just want to be there too. They want to be included. And so I think back to when I wasn't included and don't want that for others.
Yeah.
It's so fulfilling, so meaningful.
So much of what I've learned sitting with Michelle is that it takes a tremendous amount of effort to bring in the things that maybe everyone else sometimes takes for granted. Like, so we were learning about the basketball thing, and I'm like thinking about the technicalities of basketball for Gregory and his buddies. And then it just had completely missed the fact that if someone hadn't done that, these kids wouldn't get youth sports opportunities that are like not just important, but ubiquitous for everyone else. And there's a million little opportunities that I think, speaking for myself, could be easy to take for granted that someone has to stop and say, well, wait a minute, we gotta tweak the system, adjust the process so that these kids can go get the thing that is kind of easily taken.
Yeah. And then one more quick thing, since you reminded me that this was geared towards parents, but because I have another good friend who her son has a pretty significant disability, and she was one of my paras. We had a great conversation about it. But even in the hard moments, it is so important to have that partnership with the parent and the team. And for me as a teacher, I go out of my way for that. And I know some parents have had negative experiences, but I think it is so worth the restorative conversations, sitting down, getting on the same page so all needs are met. Because again, with that idea of inclusion, what do you want to get out of it? Because inclusion, that's a big term for so many like little things. So aligning as a team with the teacher and the parent, knowing that you guys are both working for the same thing. You're not trying to give me more paperwork and I'm not trying to rag on your kid, right? Like we're all here for the same reason. And so developing those strong relationships, both as the educator and from the parent side, like only benefits the kid. Because if there's conflict and advocates get involved, not that you shouldn't use an advocate, but it can be scary.
Right.
But that is where you're going to see like the success in the student. Because as soon as there's conflict, who suffers? The student.
The student, definitely.
This is fun. Thanks for including me. And
all right. Well, I really, really, really appreciate this. This is great. I can't wait for Gregory to watch it. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you soon.